Hello and welcome to Community News from the Hill. I'm your host, Erica Fox, and today we are talking about money and students here at Alabama A&M University. I'd like to welcome the Director of Financial Aid, Mr. Darryl Jackson, and hello and welcome to the show.
Hello, thanks for having me.
So glad to have you here with us. Tell us a little bit about your background and really how did you get into working with financial aid and college students?
I've actually been in the student financial aid arena for about over 15 years now. My degrees are in mathematics, and I was actually a teacher when I first left college, and I kind of defaulted into financial aid, or student administration, student financial aid administration. Worked at a couple of schools over in Georgia, and I was a consultant, and I went into schools and, we talked about financial aid and other business-related projects. So I kind of defaulted into student financial aid. It's not something that you go to school saying you're going to major in when you go to school. So I came here at A&M. I took an opportunity to, oversee the Student Financial Aid and Scholarships Office, and I've been here for going on 4 years now, and it's been enjoyable so far.
So math is your background. You like math?
Yeah, I liked it until I got involved in it to the point where I couldn't get out. So I ended up graduating in mathematics. So yeah, I liked it at one point.
How really viable is financial aid for a student's education well-being?
Particularly here at Alabama A&M, approximately 89% of our students receive some type of federal financial aid funding, and basically it's a lifeline. For a lot of our students, they would not be able to attend Alabama A&M or any other university without student financial aid. So we feel like we play an integral part in students being able to attend and afford an education here at Alabama A&M University.
So when a student says that they want to come to Alabama A&M and they need some assistance, what is the first thing that they need to do?
The first thing we recommend our students to do is, of course, go through the admissions process. But while that process is going on, they can complete what we call the FAFSA form, Federal Free Application for Federal Student Aid, FAFSA. That is the catalyst for the financial aid process. When students complete that form, everything springboards off of that. We're able to access their information if they add our school code, which is 001002. So complete the FAFSA, add our school code, and that kind of catalyzes the financial aid process and allows us to formulate you an offer to attend here at Alabama A&M University.
So when Johnny and Cindy get here with mom and dad, what paperwork do they need to have with them? Well,
the thing is, Erica, we recommend that a lot of the paperwork that can be submitted or needs to be submitted can be done long before you actually get here in August. Okay. For instance, students that are enrolling in August of 2016, this upcoming fall semester, there's some things they could have done now to make that process seamless when they get here in August. So in other words, you could have completed your FAFSA anytime after January 1, 2016 for the August 2016 school year. And what happens is when you complete that FAFSA, it generates a request for additional documentation. For instance, if we need a parent's tax form, if we need a verification worksheet, those forms can be submitted well in advance of when the student gets here in August. So basically, if everything's taken care of up front, when the student and the parent get here in August, they can just kind of, just get the student in the dorm and get them ready for class without having to worry about submitting any additional documentation to us.
Okay. Now, what's the difference between scholarships and financial aid? Is there a big difference?
Well, when we say financial aid, we're commonly referring to funding that is gained from the federal application for student aid, the FAFSA form I referred to earlier. Pell Grants, student loans, work study, where students actually work in departments on campus, things like that. That's what we typically categorize as financial aid. Now, when we say scholarships, we're talking about awards based on merit. Okay. For instance, we offer students coming out of high school a scholarship which pays tuition if you have a certain GPA and ACT score, 3.25 GPA and a 23 ACT, then that gets you a merit scholarship, which pays tuition for an in-state or an out-of-state student. So scholarships are typically, designated as items that are based on merit, but financial aid is based on completing forms and based on more so on need and things like that. So that's the primary difference between scholarships and financial aid.
So can students get information on both through your office, or would scholarship information be through the admissions office?
Actually, all of the above are available through my office. Okay. My office is actually called the Office of Student Financial Aid and Scholarships. Approximately 4 years ago, the scholarship function was actually transferred from admissions to student financial aid. So you can find the full gamut of information on our website, the financial aid website. We have a scholarship link that includes outside scholarships, which means the student actually has to apply externally for those. And you can also gain information about the regular financial aid process by going to our website. It's kind of a one-stop shop for all your funding needs here at A&M.
That makes easy shopping.
Right, right.
What kind of packages do you offer for students for financial aid?
It depends on the student's need and their socioeconomic background. There could be a number of factors that determine what a student actually receives. For instance, when we talk about the FAFSA that I referred to previously, if a student completes that FAFSA and they have a maximum need, and that means they get the maximum Pell Grant, they get the maximum need-based aid package that we can offer. So typically, if a student has maximum need, they'll get a Pell Grant, they'll be offered student loans, they'll probably get federal work study, they'll get something called SEOG, which is the Supplemental Educational Opportunity Grant, and if they receive a scholarship based on their high school merit, then it's added to that. So if a student comes in with maximum need and they have, a great academic background in high school, they can actually receive a very attractive financial package that'll, allow them to attend Alabama A&M without the cost being a prohibitive factor, as I like to say.
So what happens to students if they have the scholarship or they have the financial aid, it's taking care of the semester, and they come back for the next semester and they're told they have a balance? What happens? What does that student need to do?
Typically, what happens is when you receive federal financial aid or financial aid of any type, typically you receive the same amount for the fall semester as well as the spring semester. But in some isolated cases, a student might have some aid that they received in the fall that's not available for the spring. And what happens is if there's a balance or monies owed on the account for that fall semester, the student typically cannot register for that spring semester. So what happens is we have some programs that we work hand in hand with the student accounts office to help those students. In other words, in some cases they have to make a payment plan to take care of that balance. In some cases we have additional financial aid that we've recycled that we can offer that student at the end of the semester that we didn't have at the beginning of that semester. So if a student has a balance on their account and it's prohibiting them from registering for a subsequent semester, we just recommend that they come to our office, the Student Financial Aid and Scholarships office to see what we can do to assist them. We definitely don't want to lose any students that are academically viable due to a financial burden that they can't seem to overcome from one semester to the next.
I'm talking with Mr. Darryl Jackson. He's director of the Office of Student Financial Aid and Scholarships. How important, or what role do academics play when it comes to financial aid? How important is it for them to have their grades?
That's a great question, Erica. One of the when I'm talking to my parents of new students, I tell them that one of the most unpleasant parts of my job is that sometimes from semester to semester, I have to send out a letter stating that the student cannot receive financial aid based on their academic performance. It's something called satisfactory academic progress, which means that the students must perform at a certain academic level in order to maintain their financial aid eligibility. If not, that student can actually lose their funding and they have to regain it through, upping their academic performance. So the academic performance does play a role in the financial aid eligibility. In other words, you have to make the grades to get the funding. So we try to impress that upon our parents because a lot of parents are not aware of that, we find. We find that a lot of parents don't know that if the student doesn't make a certain GPA, if they don't complete a certain percentage of the hours they've attempted, that student can, in effect, lose their financial aid funding. And they have to, pretty much pay out of personal resources to gain it back until they can get back up to a level where they can be eligible for aid again.
Now, do the levels change semester to semester based on like how many hours they take? They must have a certain GPA for those amount of hours and so forth? Right.
Without going into too much detail, there are two components to that equation. There's a quantitative aspect as well as a qualitative aspect. By quantitative, we mean that students must complete a minimum of 67% of the hours they attempt. So however many of hours you attempt, you must complete at least 67%. And by complete, I mean you must successfully pass with a passing grade. And the qualitative element is that students must maintain a certain GPA, and that varies depending on their matriculation and what classification they are. For instance, a freshman student must have a 2.0 at the end of the first semester. If you have below a 2.0 and you don't complete 67% of your hours, then you are at risk of losing your financial aid. About 3 years ago, the federal government changed it to where we had to review this every semester. Previously, a student could have a year to establish themselves, but now, if you come in August and you don't perform at a level necessary to maintain your financial aid, your funding could be rescinded at the end of the fall semester, your very first semester here.
Oh my.
Yeah, so we try not to, yes, go to class and make good grades in order to keep the money rolling in. That's what we tell our parents and our students.
Now, what is verification? What does that mean? Is that part of the application process?
That's another great question. Verification is when students and parents submit the FAFSA form, the federal government actually mandates that the financial aid office collect certain documentation before we can offer that student an award. For instance, if that federal student aid form says that we must collect your tax forms, we must do that before we can offer you an award package. If they say we must collect, information on a verification worksheet, we must collect that. A lot of our parents and our students think that it's an Alabama A&M University policy, but that's actually a federal government policy. If your federal student aid form comes back with that flag that says verification is needed, then you must provide those additional documents before we can proceed to offer you any type of aid. So that is a federal mandate and not an Alabama A&M University driven mandate, but we must abide by it with it being a federal mandate.
I kind of think of the forms that the students have to fill out as almost like your voter registration form. You must have every number correct in terms of your address, Social Security number. Is that as vital as I think it is? It
is, definitely. Anything dealing with the federal government, you have to have all of your T's crossed, all of your I's dotted. If one number doesn't match what's on, two different forms, if you say you had $38,000 in income on this form, and if you left out a zero and you have $3,800 on this form, that's what we call conflicting information. And that means we must go back and research that and resolve it before we can proceed with your financial offer. So that can delay a student's award offer if there is conflicting information or information that doesn't match from form to form. So that is definitely as important as you indicated. It is very important.
How much financial aid is usually available for like your non-traditional students? Because I think of financial aid usually undergrads, undergraduate students. What about your graduate students and then your international students?
What we do is we offer, I'll address international students first. Actually, our internal scholarship offerings do extend to include international students because they don't qualify for the typical need-based financial aid based on the fact that they're not U.S. citizens.
Okay.
So in most cases, they have to depend on non-traditional aid for non-traditional students. So we do have programs out that we offer, and we work hand in hand with the International Programs Office, Ms. Simmons and her staff and Dr. Dunlap. We work to identify those students that might have financial challenges, and we cater, specific programs depending on what their needs are, and it's usually on a case-by-case basis. There's no cookie cutter method that we use for international students, but we do work with those on a case-by-case basis.
And graduate students? And graduate students,
we typically can only offer them one type of aid, student loans, unfortunately. Graduate students, don't receive Pell Grants or any other undergraduate level federal aid. But what we do is we work with the Graduate Studies Office to help those students identify assistantships, identify graduate assistant programs, to identify scholarship programs that are strictly catered to graduate students. So we do get creative when we work hand in hand with the Graduate Studies Office to make sure that we can offer our graduate students some opportunities to receive funding other than student loans.
Now, what about your veterans that may want to go back to school? I know we have a great Veterans Upward Bound program at NACE, North Alabama Center for Educational Excellence. I don't know how close that you may work with them, but how does financial aid assist our veterans?
We actually have a pretty healthy veteran enrollment here at Alabama A&M University, and that's because of obviously the military base over at Redstone and things like that. We do work hand in hand with the Veterans Affairs Office, Ms. Sonoya Williams. She's a good conduit for referring students to us. A lot of our veteran students, they receive veterans benefits, which means that they must first complete the actual documentation through the Veterans Affairs Office, and we kind of see, my office kind of sees what happens at the tail end of that as far as applying the funding to students' accounts. So the initial point of contact for a veteran is to go through that Veterans Affairs office, and then once my office gets involved in the process, they can usually see the fruition of what they've applied for. So we do, and the common theme in all of these equations is that collaboration between offices. You know, my office, we work hand in hand with a lot of offices on campus to make sure that we can serve our students to the best of our ability.
Networking is always good, as they say, making the net work.
Exactly.
That's good.
Exactly.
What about single parents? Is there any kind of a reprieve for single moms or single dads sending their children to Alabama A&M to college?
There's nothing etched in stone for a single parent, but what we do is we recommend that they complete the FAFSA form, and depending on what's on that form, there are some programs that are catered to a person who has a dependent other than their spouse. So if there's a single parent who has a need level, then we do cater to them based on what's on that FAFSA form. But back to what we initially said earlier, the FAFSA form is going to be the catalyst for our single parents, especially to see what we can do to address their needs as far as their financial aid funding.
Is financial aid offered for summer school?
Summer school is kind of an interesting subject because summer school is actually designated as the end of the current school year. So in other words, what happens is if a student has financial aid for the fall and for the spring, the only eligibility they have for the summer is something that was left over from those 2 semesters. So typically, and unfortunately, as if a student received the maximum amount of financial aid they could get for the fall and the spring, they typically don't have anything left for summer. And about 4 years ago, the federal government eliminated the summer Pell Grant. There was actually an additional Pell Grant amount available for summer students, even if you received the full amount for the fall and the spring, but the federal government rescinded that option based on what they called excessive spending for the Pell Grant program. So unfortunately, summer school ends up being a challenge for a lot of our students because we typically don't have too much we can offer them if they used up all their aid for the fall and the spring. So typically if a student attends summer school, they're looking at using some personal resources or some type of external funding that has been derived from a source other than my office.
Okay. Now, where are you all located?
We're in Patton Hall, Suite 211, second floor Patton Hall. That's where we're located. Our hours are Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. And we do have extended hours by appointment. So if you can't make it by 5, you know, when you talk about the non-traditional students earlier, if you have a job, you can't make it in to see us between 8 and 5, call us and we will definitely set you an appointment to come by, you know, in the afternoon, in the evening, 6:30. And we will definitely do what is needed to get every one of our students taken care of.
And what is the phone number and also the website?
You can reach us at 256-372-5400. And the website is, if you go to the main AAMU.edu website, if you look to the left, you'll see a financial aid link. And you will see a picture of me on our financial aid page. We are ready to serve, and we look forward to making this process as seamless as possible for our new students, for our current students, and for any of our constituents.
All right. Thank you so very much. Appreciate the information. And our guest today is Mr. Darryl Jackson. He's Director of the Office of Student Financial Aid and Scholarships. I'm Erica Fox. Thank you so very much for tuning in to Community News from the Hill. Please have a great day.